The Phantasmagorium show presents guns, martinis, gadgets, and guns. Roger Moore will perhaps always be remembered as the man who replaced Sean Connery in the James Bond series, arguably something he never lived down. For almost 2 decades, Vijay Amtaraj was one of the most famous tennis players in the world and was the top tennis player in Asia for 14 straight years. Christina Wayborn was elected Miss Sweden in 1970, and she was a semi-finalist in the Miss Universe pageant. The same year, she was also elected Miss Scandinavia. On today's show, we relive the most risque titled Octopussy. I am Scotty, my opposite number Catherine is here, and Steve is working on his backhand at Kamal Khan's club. What's going on, Kat?
Oh man, I literally just finished watching the movie while scarfing down some pizza.
How'd that go?
It went well. Very fun.
Excellent. So, first things first, we have some No Time to Die distribution news.
Yes. So apparently people who've been getting advanced copies of the Blu-ray to review are saying that the free digital copy included is only good for iTunes, which I was a little disappointed by. It doesn't have Movies Anywhere capability, and it's like, I don't watch movies on iTunes. I'll watch them on, like, I have Vudu, I have my movies on YouTube, or the ones on Prime or Google Play, and I usually use Vudu because it's so well organized. But I was like, that's kind of upsetting because iTunes, I don't even know how that works. I don't have an iTunes account. It's like I plug in my iPod Touch, and it's like, oh, it recognizes it immediately, and it's like I need to upgrade my computer. So does that mean I lose all my stuff? Is it in the cloud? I have no idea. So who knows? We might have some special giveaways next week.
Ooh, so that'll be special, and that'll be on our View to a Kill.
Assuming that my copy gets delivered on time. It should be. I pre-ordered it. Sometimes, they're a little slow. Like yesterday, for instance, I got my Venom Let There Be Carnage steelbook, and it was delivered to the wrong house, and I had to go hunt it down in the neighborhood.
Sounds like a James Bond movie all unto itself.
It did. It was 36 degrees outside, and it was very thick fog, and I got to go play the role of porch pirate. In fact, it felt a bit like the 009's adventure at the beginning of this very film.
Well, as long as Carnage Let There Be Carnage fell out of your hand in an embassy somewhere.
No, I'm afraid I was actually able to hold on to it just fine.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Spider-Man. Oh, Spider-Man is in that one. Spoilers for Venom, but that's not it. We're not a Spider-Man show. We're a, what do you call it? James Bond show. Well, we have been traditionally, and you know what? Congratulations to the both of us. I think that we've done a really good job at doing, this is our 20th episode. Happy anniversary.
Yes.
I heard a thing that it was not many people get 20 episodes.
Really?
And yeah. So you know what? I just want to thank everybody who shows up and says hello and comments and likes and subscribes. Of course, I'm sorry. I'm saying this because it's all sort of reflexive. But no, everybody who shows up to hang out during Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns, either during the live show or if you watch us after the fact in the recordings. Thanks. We like talking about Bond. We are glad you like to hear Kat recap them.
Yes, and in other news, in the weekly box office report, No Time to Die is now at $771 million.
Well, I did see it twice more.
You did?
No.
Oh.
I lie.
I did my part. I saw it 7 times in theaters.
I think you did it for both of us, and so I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I should, you know what? I should try.
But your apology for not getting back out there and doing your part.
That is the correct answer.
Yes.
So we have a movie to talk about tonight.
Yes, Roger came back yet again, even after he wasn't. They thought he wasn't going to come back. They started looking. He got kind of upset that they were looking behind his back again, and so he just signed on again. And they thought, oh, okay, it's making money, so let's bring him back. And this, of course, was the year of the Battle of the Bonds between Roger Moore and Sean Connery in his Thunderball remake, Never Say Never Again. Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert, this film won the Battle of the Bonds at the box office.
This is true.
By a substantial margin. and man, this movie, talk about a wild swing in the other direction. Because like you go to Moonraker and that's Hoki going to space and all that. Then they literally and figuratively got much more grounded in the next one, and now they're swinging for the fences again with something. It's almost as if some critic had complained that Moonraker was too out there, so they decided, okay, we'll appease them by making something grounded. And then somebody else must have complained, like another critic, oh, this is not fantastical enough for what Rogers films have been like up to this point. True. So, we'll just do something ridiculously fantasy stuff again, like what they're doing here. So.
Well, but I would also argue that this is sort of the median. This is the movie that sort of, aside from chasing, there are a couple of moments, and we'll talk about them when we get there, but there are moments where it's sort of emulating and chasing the blockbusters of the time. This is the moment where James Bond became, I don't know.
Well, I think this is what they mean when they say that he's definitely like more of a parody of Bond rather than, being Bond.
Yes, and you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, you hit the Octo on the pussy.
It says as much in one of the scenes in this film.
Yeah, well, and there are a lot of incredible interactions with Q, and there are a lot of things where I'm just like, why are you even here, old man? We have a new M with Robert Brown.
Yes, Admiral Hargreaves has been promoted to the place of the former M, and on the one hand, it was nice that they were being respectful by not recasting M in the previous film, but I also found it a bit odd that, given that they're making the case that this is the same continuity because it's Admiral Hargreaves, that they didn't at least acknowledge the passing of the past M, like maybe a portrait, like cheers to a portrait or something, or a drink to M. It'd be one thing if this was supposed to be a new continuity, but the fact that that's clearly the same character and that's how they approached it for these last two films, I thought that was a little odd. Just like, oh, he's gone.
Well, and this is my first real...
In fact, even in No Time to Die, they have the portraits of Judi Dench's M and Robert Brown's M, but they don't have Bernard Lee's M in there.
Perhaps that's going too far for the kids to remember. But no, I think that it's a lack of sentiment that was still prevalent in government agencies, and there's something about the British stiff upper lip that is represented by the transition between M and M. Is
M and M.
The M&Ms. No. And so I think it was a matter of M's on leave during the last one, and now we have a new M, and what happened to Miles? Please, 007, we don't get sentimental around here. I kind of feel like it was fitting, but I think it's also part of the reason why Robert Brown doesn't necessarily get as much credit as he deserves as being an M.
Yeah, I thought he was a pretty good M, and that he has a completely different relationship with Bond than, like, Bernard Lee was very adversarial, but at times he would stick up for Bond, whereas Robert Brown, he seems almost a bit flustered at times. Like, how could you do that, Bond? Oh, what's going on? And then Bond would, like, surprise him. Like, well, sir, this is what we're doing. And he's like, oh, But there's a hinge of the Bernard Lee humor and stuff in there. I did think there was even a little... I mean, everybody talks about the obvious Goldfinger tribute in this movie, which we'll get to with the Gobinda character. But I think there was one with the Robert Brown M as well.
Well, and I think that the entire opening title sequence is a blatant ripoff of Goldfinger.
Yeah, this is still the era where the opening title sequences have a lot of sameness to me. It's like a bunch of silhouetted girls, and then you have usually a girl, an actual girl, scantily clad while they're playing the song.
I don't want to talk about the opening title sequence quite yet because I have much anger. But I mean, the pre-title sequence, I think, is absolutely lifted from Goldfinger.
Which part?
The part where he goes to an army base, changes from his infiltration clothes into different infiltration clothes, tries to set up a bomb to blow up something, and then leaves. Now, I understand that it's not necessarily plot point per plot point, but it is pretty much the exact same thing, except with a Roger Moore flourish that turns into an airplane chase.
I guess that's true. Are we starting the recap now?
Well, I don't know. You ready?
I guess. Uh,
Don't muck it up this time, 007.
I won't. I won't have as hard of a time recapping this one as I did last week. So
It'll be fine. It'll be great. I love it.
We have the classic gun barrel. Good.
Great. Okay, wait. Before we even get there, I'm sorry. This is the first time that the credit came up and it said United Artists Presents.
True. Because they
was this the brand new acquisition for United Artists, or was this?
Yes, this was another partnership merger with MGM in the 80s. And we've seen hints of that as well with other movies. Like, for instance, overseas, No Time to Die begins with the Universal logo because they were the international distributor, and then you get the MGM logo, whereas in North America, you just start with the MGM logo.
Okay.
So there's like different things for that. So, yeah, I guess, of course, we always start with the corporate logos. But you're right, because it is a little odd that after they have the MGM logo, it actually says United Artists Releasing rather than just having the United Artists logo on it, which is a little odd.
Well, and then the gun barrel, we do go to a classically orchestrated gun barrel. There's no wiki. It's no metal. We are watching a James Bond movie, at which point I was relaxed and I sat back.
Yes, and so this film begins with we're supposed to be in Cuba, but I think they just filmed this on the back lot at Pinewood and then cropped in some palm trees or whatever, just planted a few fake ones. And there's a horse track, and there's a guy here who's clearly supposed to be Fidel Castro, like an impersonator or whatever. And he's checking out this hot chick standing next to him. And he's kind of distracted by that. And Bond is sneaking around dressed in this military uniform like a colonel. And he's got a fake mustache on. He's got the black aviators, and he's not looking too bad, except for the part where he's supposed to be passing as like a Cuban colonel. And it's like, okay. So he goes into this hangar nearby. That's why you have this big hangar here that is the target of Bond's mission. He's there to blow it to smithereens. Why you have an important place like that right next to a horse track where a bunch of people are there? I'm not sure. It's a little odd. So he goes in.
It's a small island. Island.
He goes to set this bomb, and little does he know, the actual colonel he's impersonating is walking through. And he actually does, at a distance, look like a decent resemblance to Roger Moore, actually. And what catches the colonel's eye is he sees across the hangar these two soldiers saluting this guy, and he can't see what he looks like. So he goes over to see, and Bond, meanwhile, has opened his briefcase and taken a bomb out and planted it inside the nose cone of one of the planes, because it's like a mechanics hangar of sorts.
And it's got like a...
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, and it's up beeping, and no sooner that he turns to walk away, he's captured, the bomb's defused, he's in trouble. They march him away into this military troop transport, and they drive him off at gunpoint. And so they're driving away, and the woman who Castro is kind of eyeballing, she goes back to her Jeep, which is pulling a horse trailer, and she gets in the car, and presumably she's waiting for Bond to come back, but then she sees him in the back of this troop transport as it speeds by on the road. So then she takes off after them and just driving by, and Bond, being Bond, waits for her truck to come up alongside, and he does a couple slick moves against the guards to, because what he's doing is he's sitting in the back and he nods to gesture for them to look at the girl in the car into the Jeep next to them, and she's of course pulling back her blouse a little bit, letting them see her cleavage, and Bond, the look on Bond's face, it's priceless. He's like, look at that, and the guards are dumb enough that they actually fall for it, and
there is side boob. An inner side boob, and there's panties. Like, this is everything. This is titillation in 1980. What year? 3?
Yeah, 83.
This is 1983. You got to see the cover of Playboy as you were walking through the convenience store level of titillation. It's amazing.
Yeah, and once they get distracted just enough, Bond lunges for the gun and knocks these guys. Instead of shooting them, because he doesn't want to make too much of a commotion, he knocks them off the back. Or
he pulls parachutes.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, he and he's pretty quiet about it too. Like, he pulls the chutes.
Oh, it's
why they're
stuff.
wearing parachutes, fully packed and ready to go on the transport? Like, are they gonna go skydiving lately? I don't know.
Like, on the back of a truck, and this is the first time where I sort of sit up a little bit and I'm like, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny with the gag that he distracts him that easily, but it's like, wait, what? And so the parachutes ignite, and it's like there's no reason why they can't just train their guns on them while their parachutes take off and just shoot them. But of course they don't, because and so Bond then leaps into the it's in the Jeep, and the car's driving by, and the drivers of the transport then see the lady, and they're like, and they're like waving, and then but then her Jeep drives a little faster, and they see Bond in the back pointing his gun, and he's like, and then he fires into the radiator of the troop transport to stop them on the road. And by now the Colonel has gotten plenty of other people to start chasing them, because I guess he must have seen the parachutes in the air. It's like, what the hell's going on? And so Bond bids goodbye to this woman who's his contact, undercover agent or whatnot. They kiss goodbye, and then he gets into the horse trailer. He unhooks it, comes to a stop, and we see that the horse whose tail is hanging out the back is just a facade, and it lifts straight up, and you see that in the back of the horse trailer is this Astrostar jet, which is like a really tiny jet with like a nose cone on it. And Bond's getting in the Jeep, in the car, and he's driving along, and the military's catching up, and they're ready to get him, and he extends the wings. He starts speeding down, and classic, it goes airborne just as he's about to crash into these things, or into the military barrage coming at him. And then he starts flying to try and get away from these people, but they launch missiles at him, because of course they got all sorts of military equipment here. The heat seeker is coming after him, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And then he gets this clever idea, and they did this stunt, unfortunately not for real, as I would have liked to see. Sort of, well, they did part of it for real. They did fly it through a hangar, but to get the shot of it in the hangar, they did a model which they mounted on a truck to drive through. And of course, when Bond's flying the jet through the hangar, you see the guards are all trying to close the door on the other side, and even though you could tell it's a cheat, because the door is clearly way too closed by the time it flies out, and you could tell that's a little bit of a cheat there. But the door's shut, the heat seeker impacts, and the real Colonel's, it blows the place to smithereens in what is admittedly a spectacular explosion.
Really, really good. Really good explosion.
Yes, Bond gets away in the jet, and then he has to land because he's out of gas. And he just folds the wings up, and he casually drives into this gas station, and the guy there, the serviceman, gets up and kind of looking at him, and Bond's like, "Fill her up, please." Never mind.
Which I really appreciated.
You can't put regular gasoline inside an AstroCharger.
Q could make it happen, and I thought it was a perfect line. I appreciate it, and it's like, no, that makes sense. And then 1980s easy listening with softcore pornography happens for approximately 3 minutes. Who sings this song?
Rita Coolidge, with lyrics by Tim Rice. I actually like this song. It doesn't really feel like a Bond song, though. It's kind of it's good. Just a Bond song, really? It's like, okay. So
I don't think it's good at all. I think it lulled me into a sense of being bored and thinking that I was going to the dentist.
That's very bizarre, but I like it.
It sounds like doctor's office music. Yeah, I might as well. This isn't even something that would be converted into elevator music. It is already pure formed elevator music.
Elevator music's worse to me, but anyway.
Yeah, well, okay.
Okay, yeah. So we have the pre-title sequence, a lot of nudity, a lot of silhouettes, all that kind of stuff. So then we come out and we find ourselves in East Berlin. We see the military base there, and the camera's kind of panning down on it, and it settles on this clown, this circus clown, and for some reason he has balloons tied to him, which doesn't seem to make much sense. And so, given that this is in fact an undercover secret agent, 009 with MI6.
Here's what I was thinking, though, because I was wondering why he wouldn't let go of the balloons, but that would give away his position, as well as holding onto the balloons give away his position.
I thought he would have gotten rid of them when he left the circus before he left the circus tent or wherever it is that he stole this from. But that's a little weird. Anyway,
that makes more sense.
I actually think, for what it's worth, this is a great sequence.
Yes.
One of the best in the whole film, actually. So he's running through the woods, away from the military base, in the fog, and these two twins are chasing him, and they're in the circus.
Zaymot and Tomax.
Mishka and Grishka, actually.
Right.
They're chasing him, and at times it's really funny that they can't really see him. Like, there's one time where the clown runs through this clearing, and he ducks into these thin trees, and then Mishka or Grishka comes through the clearing and looking around like he can't see him. It's like, really? You can't see this bright yellow clown in the plaid shirt? Okay. So he takes off, and he loses his hat in the bushes, and one of the twins finds it, and then he keeps on going, and one of the balloons pop, and that alerts Mishka and Grishka to where he is. And it's funny, he gets to the bridge at the border crossing. He's climbing. He lunges up on the fence and he's climbing. You can see American servicemen are walking right there, but he doesn't say anything, even though, again, he's an undercover agent. You could say something, and he doesn't. And so Mishka or Grishka, one of the two, gets one of his knives, throws it, knifes him in the back. He falls into the river, and I guess he just plays dead at this point because he's actually alive. And it doesn't look like the serviceman noticed this or heard the splash. He washes down the river quite a ways, and he gets out. He's stumbling, and he's made it over into the West Germany, albeit not the way that he planned. And he stumbles through the front gate of the British ambassador's residence, which the gate's unlocked and opened, and there's no guard there, but okay. And it looks like there's some party going on. You have all the guests, and I guess it's the ambassador's wife. She's putting on her jewelry, looking herself in the mirror, and she sees this clown and rightly screams as he collapses through the glass doors, falls dead on the ground, and drops this beautiful Fabergé egg. And the ambassador kind of picks it up and looks at it, and he's kind of weirded out, like, what's this about? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So then we cut to...
well, and it's a great MacGuffin. It's a great introduction to how the action is going to move forward. Like I don't know. There's something about the circus, and I'm just like this. We go East Berlin, and maybe it's the juxtaposition of being on that side of the Iron Curtain at the time, and then going to a circus, and then seeing the clown chase. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm still intrigued.
Yes. So then we cut to MI6 at Moneypenny's office, and this is interesting. So Bond walks in there, and we see this other young woman there, and he starts trying to flirt with her, and then Moneypenny's like, I'm over here. And it seems to be an indication that they were getting ready to, like, recast Moneypenny, which Lois Maxwell was not happy with, understandably so. And she must have said something behind the scenes or done something, because this young assistant doesn't come back in the next movie. And so Bond has...
what's her name? Madeline Smallbone? Or Sylvia Smallbone?
Something unforgettable. And so Bond has like a dozen...
Smallbone.
And he has a dozen roses, and he gives one to Moneypenny, and he gives the bushel to the assistant. And Moneypenny's like, oh, don't bother, dearie. That's all you'll ever get from him. And Bond kind of seems to, take almost like he took a light offense to that. And she's like, oh, what do you expect? That kind of thing. And so Bond gets buzzed into the office, and he goes in there, and we have the new M, as we mentioned, Admiral Hargreaves, promoted. And he's there with this guy, the
minister, defense minister. He was in the last movie as well.
Well, yeah, not just him, but the guy he's going to go to the auction with.
The division art curator.
Yeah, so they tell Bond that, okay, we need you to check this out. He gives and M gives him this Fabergé egg, and being Bond, being a genius, he lists the entire history of this egg. How it's a Fabergé egg that they were made for the Tsar's wife in like the 1870s, and M's listening to this is like, that's great, Bond, except for one thing, it's a fake. And he's like, what? And then the art curator guy, he's like, oh yes, here's where the real one is. It's going to be auctioned off today, Sotheby's, and I'm going to go down there. And Bond's like, oh, maybe I can accompany you. And he's like, oh, what a wonderful idea. And M kind of wrecks the party by showing him the dossier, and he says, for your eyes only, Bond, you're replacing 009. And Bond pulls out the picture of the dead agent, still in the clown face, and he's like, yeah, died in East Germany with that egg in his hand. And he's like, unfortunately, we have no leads. And Bond's like, oh, we have one lead, sir. And he takes the little pamphlet, and it says property of a lady.
Which is a reference, yeah.
Yeah, a reference to a Bond story, and might have made a better title for this movie, or maybe not, because of how ridiculous the film is.
You know what? The best part of the movie is the title. Yeah,
that's true. I promise it's not a 70s porno as much as it sounds like one. The British always thinking they're so cheeky with these things.
Maybe that's why they didn't bound chicka wow during the anyway.
Yeah. So then we cut to Moscow, and it's at a war room, and this war room looks like the lobby of some like hotel that it reminds me kind of like a lobby of a hotel. You have little plants in there, all the marble on the floor trying to look really pristine, except there's no windows. There's like a world map on the wall that shows all the Soviet and communist controlled territories and all the capitalist ones. And they're giving a briefing about what the NATO forces are like, what theirs are on the border, blah, blah, blah. And then General Orlov, played by Steven Berkoff, requests to give his presentation. And he basically chastises all the other generals there and his boss, saying that, look, NATO's forces are very decadent, and I've got 11 tank divisions right along the border with East Germany. I've got another 22 divisions along the actual Soviet border. And if there were types of disarmament, there's nothing that could stop us from basically steamrolling the West. And he shows a simulation on another map. This is actually a cool thing where.
Oh, it's really cool.
Yeah, they're sitting. Their table is sort of impractically shaped like a crescent moon type thing, and it has the hammer and scythe symbol on the floor, and that floor turns like a turnstile, and then the whole marble wall like opens to have a second map, just so he could do a digital graphic of the red Soviet line moving forward and taking over what would be Sweden, the rest of Norway, rest of Germany, Ukraine, Yugoslavia, Asia Minor, and it's like. Or Turkey, and not as much territory as you would think, but that is at least not enough for how crazy he is. And Luxembourg, Belgium, all that. And General Gogol was there, a good friend from the previous films, and he naturally thinks this guy's completely insane. Because General Orlov, if we're being honest, is basically a cartoon character. It's so cartoonish, and given that General Gogol isn't even the highest-ranking officer at this meeting, there's another guy there who actually stands up and tells them both to shut up when Orlov and Gogol start going at it.
I thought that was supposed to be the only representation of the premiere throughout.
I think so. And It was funny that you would think from how everybody at the table thinks that Orlov is crazy, including the premier, that he would have been like fired or something. It's like, really? We're going to put up with this guy? And Orlov goes to sit down, and the premier reminds him that our military is for defense only, Orlov. Do you understand? And Orlov doesn't say anything. He's just kind of sitting, being a little bitchy about it. And so the meeting ends.
He does do one of these.
He does. He gets like really pouty. I'm like, what the hell is this thing? So he leaves the meeting, or the meeting ends rather, and he goes to this shady like underground place, and he's meeting this art jeweler and one of the twins. And the twins is like, sorry, he stole the egg and we lost it. And he's like, well, then we'll need another one. It's like, well, they're about to sell it at the auction. He's like, well, then we better contact them and make sure that they get it back in time. So then we cut to the auction house, and Bond and the artsy guy are there, and they're watching, and we see the guy who arguably, we had this discussion before on whether he's a main villain or supporting villain, depending how we look at it. We have Kamal Khan, exiled Afghan prince, played by Louis Jourdan, great actor. He's sitting in the crowd, and next to him is Magda, as you mentioned her already. And,
yes. Miss Universe, second runner-up.
Yeah, so she's sitting there, and they're bidding on this Fabergé egg, and you could tell Khan's not very happy. He's kind of frustrated that he has to do the bidding, and the curator guy whispers to Bond, he's like, oh yeah, this guy Khan, he usually sells. It's kind of odd that he's buying. And Bond says, well, let's see how much he'll be willing to buy. And he starts driving the price up by bidding on it, and the guy's upset. He's like, Bond, we can't buy this, which is odd, because in the previous scene, he even mentioned to Bond, like teased the idea that they could drive up the price to see how much this guy's going to buy it for. And now he's upset that Bond's actually doing it. And once it gets to 450, everybody starts gasping, and it gets to 475, and Bond, calls the egg over to him. And so the curator brings it over on this pillow, and what would never happen, he lets him pick it up with his bare hands and look at it and take it below the table. And he does a sleight of hand, which probably is done to look that easy because they need the audience to know what he did. Whereas in reality, obviously they would see that in a second and that would not work. But
okay. So, and this was always something that I met with incredulity. However, in the reality of the film, if Bond were because it is presented that you can take a look at it, and there's a guy who has like a jeweler's lens, and he picks up the egg and he examines it, and he's like, no, I don't know, diamonds weren't good enough for him. So anyway, then Bond does it, and when he picks it up, his eyes are on the catalog, and he picks it up, but he brings it under, and it comes up just quickly enough that it's like, okay, I think that everyone there would be okay. So while, of course, he would be searched, in movie logic,
examine it. You just don't pick it up off the put it. You have to like wear gloves. And
but the previous guy did.
Well, the reason it's on like the large pillow is that you have your gloves on, and you could inspect it while it's there. Everybody could see it. So yeah, in the reality of the film, he switches it. He decides to pass on bidding, and Khan wins the bid for $500,000. And you could tell he's again agitated by this. And then the curator's, I can't believe this. And Bond's like, well, I knew he was going to buy it. How'd you know? He's like, he had to buy it. He said it yourself. He sells all the time. Or that he's not much of a buyer. And so he tails him outside, and he sees Khan leaving with Magda, and they get in a car with Gobinda. tall henchman sidekick, and he's watching him leave, and and the curator, the art expert guy's like, well, where do you think he's going? He's like, well, I'm about to find out. And I just thought it was funny that the art expert was so excited about the prospect of going to the auction with Bond and driving up the price, and he's like so worried and flustered about all this. And it's like, of course Bond is going to follow the guy. That's what he's been tasked to do by M. Stupid. So he goes to so he returns. So he returns to MI6 headquarters, and he tells M what happened, and M's like, okay, well then if he's going to New Delhi, which Bond has figured out from tailing him to the airport, then we need you on the next flight there. And he's like, oh, I already beat you, sir. He's already got his tickets. And he's on his way out, and he's like, Bond. And this is where I thought was another Goldfinger reference, where in Goldfinger, M reminds Bond not to take the gold bullion bar with him and to check it with Q Branch. And Bond's about to leave with a Fabergé egg. He's like, Bond, be sure to check that with the front desk on your way out. It's government property now. It's so
sign it, shit.
Yeah, sign it, shit. So he leaves to go and do that. Then we cut to India, and it's like a montage of everybody down by the Ganges River. Even though the flight was going to Delhi, this is actually Rajasthan. And Bond arrives in a helicopter, one of those waterbed helicopters. He gets out. He's walking through the up by the shoreline, and he's kind of looking around, enjoying the place, kind of wondering who he's looking for. And all of a sudden, this guy, played by Vijay Armitage, the tennis star, as you mentioned, playing a character named VJ.
They're
not that creative, and they're just that lazy in the script. He starts playing the Bond theme on his flute as he's or not his flute, his I'm not good with instruments, but he's playing
his sitar, his accordion, I don't know, his woodwind instrument.
He's like a snake charmer. He's got the snake there, and he plays the Bond theme, which is like sort of breaking the fourth wall. It's like, wait, why does Bond recognize it? I guess that's supposed to be the code. So Bond hears the code music. He goes over, greets him. He's like, "Hi, I'm VJ. I'm your contact. Great." And he asks, "Well, who lives up there?" Because he noticed this big palace on his way, and he's like, "Oh, that's Khan. The exiled Afghan prince. That's where he lives." And "Oh, you're going to be coming staying with me. Don't worry. He comes to the hotel. He likes to play backgammon and everything with everybody. Come on, I'll go. We'll greet you there." So they go to the hotel, and they check in, and Bond sees that Khan is sitting at the backgammon table with Gobinda standing next to him, and he's playing this really dumb British major, and of course Khan's winning every round because he's got loaded dice, and it's so mind-numbingly obvious that it's inexplicable that nobody else, or not even the major, can seem to suspect that. And the major's like, "Oh, you keep rolling double sixes," and it's like, "Oh, I assure you, Major, it's all in the wrist." And he keeps recommending with each hand that they double the take, and the dumb major just keeps doing it, and finally it becomes too much for him. He's like, "Sorry, your luck is just too great." And so he gets up to leave the table, and Bond's like, "Personally, I would have taken that bet." And Khan's like, "Oh, really? How would you like to join us, Mr. Bond, James Bond? Again, let's just blow our cover and not even try and disguise ourselves here." So he sits down at the backgammon table, and they got to play around. And once again, Khan wants to double the bid. And he's like, Bond's like, "Well, if that's the case, are you going to be able to pay cash?" He's like, "Yeah, I could pay cash. What are you going to stake it with?" And then Bond pulls the Fabergé egg out and sets it down, and that's where the moment where, of course, Khan and Gobinda now know exactly what this is really about, and this has nothing to do.
Well, and Magda's there, and she's like, "Oh my!"
Yeah, she's like, "Oh my!" And so Bond's
and that is a total Goldfinger ripoff, like dropping the gold bar on the green. Yeah,
exactly. And then Bond says, "Well, if we're going to be doubling things like this and betting this, then player's privilege. I want to use your dice. I'm not familiar with backgammon very much. I have a backgammon set, never figured out how to play it. But I guess this player's privilege thing exists because Khan did not stop him. And so he takes the loaded dice. Bond wins, and Khan reluctantly cuts him the check. And Gobinda just angrily grabs the dice. And again, the odd job thing from Goldfinger where he crushes the golf ball. And Gobinda it's not as impressive to see him crush the dice because golf balls.
Oh, no. Gobinda is so awesome in terms of crushing the dice, just because like anyone can crush a golf ball. It's so big, like you could do it.
I guess,
but with the dice, because they're smaller, I feel like he has more pressure per square inch.
That's probably true. And then just the look on his face. I think this is a great character as far as henchman.
Oh yeah, I had an entire backstory going on in my brain about Gobinda. No, he's awesome.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to share that story as well. And so he squeezes the thing and it breaks to pieces. The dust is on there, and I love how nobody reacts to this. So clearly this was loaded dice, especially as if they're dumb enough not to know that already from all the double sixes he rolled. But now actually seeing all the sand and come out of it, it's like it's movie logic. And so Gobinda walks off, and they're going upstairs, and Vijay suddenly comes back from the bar, and he's like, should I be following them? And Bond's like, you should, but I think they'll be following me instead. And so they go to leave, and
well, and also at this point, do we have the tracker in the Fabergé egg?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're almost about to. So they leave, they get in a cab, and they're going through town, and all of a sudden Gobinda shows up, and he's riding in another cab, and this is where the chase sequence begins, where you have a bunch of silly things happening, riding upstairs and going through the marketplace, and Gobinda gets out this big blunderbuss and starts shooting at them with it. And
I was going to call it a blunderbuss. Thanks, Kat.
And nobody's ducking for cover, and it's all fine. And eventually they crash the cab. A few of the cabs crash, and they end up in this little marketplace where there's like a guy lying on a bed of nails, and he's kind of bothered by the fact that Bond and Gobinda are fighting, and he gets up and you see all the spiked holes in his back. And there's a weird joke, which I don't think the filmmakers realize that it doesn't work, where you see Bond run across the fiery coals, but he has his shoes on, so what's the big deal?
No.
It's like, okay. So eventually...
I thought, like, that's a trope in the early 80s, is that any time that there are fiery... Actually, it's still a trope today. Anytime anyone walks across hot coals, they're always, ooh, ow, ha, ooh, ah, gee.
Right, but Bond didn't really do that this time, but he's not... But the fact that he's wearing shoes, it's like, well, then what's the joke there for? It's like, okay. At one point, he actually takes all the money that he won, cons cash, and just throws it. It's like, here, rupees, everywhere. And Vijay kind of sees it and smiles, and Bond's like, easy come, easy go. And I love how Vijay's just totally cool with this. Like, he's not bothered they're being chased. Like, whatever. Eventually, they do find themselves driving into a little. It reminds me of a Raiders of the Lost Ark moment, and probably was ripped off from that movie because it was 2 years earlier.
Oh, we will crash into Raiders of the Lost Ark later as well.
Yes, they drive into this little alcove, and then it's kind of cheap. Unlike Raiders, where you have people block the entrance, so making it look like a makeshift marketplace for when Belloc shows up. But here, it's a really cheap and tacky kind of
movie poster.
Yeah, like a movie poster.
Kind of like in From Russia with Love.
Yeah, and what's ridiculous, especially, is that Gobinda saw them run in here. He could see there's literally no other way out of here, and he's not even going. It's like, okay, and yeah, that's true. He is too cool. So they leave, and we find that once again we are inside a Q's field office. Why, I don't know. And the gadget that he's trying out in particular is a guy he's coiling up a bunch of rope, and the rope will just automatically just shoot up. It's a little weird.
Like a mechanical beanstalk, but made of rope because of stereotypes.
Yeah, Bond brings him his dinner jacket, and he's like, "Oh, I got knifed, but my wallet was barely there to save it." He's like, "Anything else?"
And I misplaced my Walther.
Yeah, I misplaced my Walther. He's like, "Oh, geez, anything else, Bond?" He's like, "Oh, no, that's it." And he gives Q the Fabergé egg, and Q is the one who puts the tracking device in it, or the tracking in the listening device. And as he's doing that, Bond, being very juvenile, gets a camera and starts zooming in on this lady's cleavage, and Vijay just smiling and loving.
Miss Smallbone's cleavage.
Yeah, and Vijay is smiling and laughing about it and having and thinks it's really great. And Q's like, "Oh, grow up, 007. We don't have time for this adolescent stuff." Again, in the sense of it being a parody onto itself. Just this whole thing. And so he gives Bond, so some lady walks up and gives Bond his dinner jacket back. It's already been fixed, and presumably they put something else back behind the breastplate, probably to toughen it up. And they give him a new pistol, and he gets the egg, and it's like, okay, we'll see you later, Bond. And they go back to the hotel, and he finds out that there's a dinner reservation for him. He's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, oh, she's waiting for you, Mr. Bond. And he's like, oh, okay. So he goes out there. This is a really nice hotel. I'm not sure if it was a hotel for real, but it looks pretty cool. And he's sitting outside, and you see Magda there, and she's there to greet him, and they're flirting, and of course Bond knows that she's there to seduce him and for the egg. Like he knows that, and she probably knows that he knows that, but they don't care.
Pretty much the same scene as Liesel from the last movie.
Yeah, pretty much. So then they go to back to Bond's room, and they're having sex, and it's like I get it in this case because she's actually trying to seduce him for the purpose of stealing something. It's not like she has the hots for him. she's just reluctantly doing this just because. And at one point, Bond sees her octopus tattoo. He's like, "What's that?" She's like, "Oh, that's my little Octopussy." And it's like, oh God. And so I know. So later that night, Bond lets her.
That gets weirder when we find out why.
Yeah. So Bond lets her steal the egg. And
lets her? Yes, lets her.
He does. He lets her. And she gets a bunch of bed sheets and ties it together with a rope like Rapunzel or whatever, and just twirls her way up.
It was like Cirque du Soleil. That was awesome. How she ties herself up and then after getting filled out like an application by James Bond. Yeah.
So she rolls out and gets in Khan's car, and Khan actually looks right up at Bond, and he looks back at him. It's like, yeah, no, this is what's going on. Bond kind of just smiles, and then Gobinda knocks him unconscious from behind. Right. So then Bond, wakes up from unconsciousness. He's trapped at Khan's palace, but he's invited.
I would like to point out that Bond is still wearing the same pajamas that he was wearing when he got beat to unconsciousness by Gobinda. And it is one of those things where I was like, well, that's a nice touch.
Yes.
Like they didn't give him clothes, but then he immediately goes to a closet that has all of the formal wear that any man could need.
Yeah, because they want to take care of him and find out what he knows. And so Bond puts on this tuxedo and they invite him down to dinner. And it's a nice little palace. And they're serving sheep's head and with the eyeballs there. And Khan actually takes the eyeball out of one and just eats it. And I'm thinking, was this part of the inspiration for the dinner scene in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which came out the following year? Eating these grossed out meals. I don't know anything about any. I mean, obviously the cuisine in Temple of Doom's all bullshit, but as far as lamb's head, I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of weird.
Well, it may be a delicacy. I think it is sort of the same era of trying to open up an exoticism, but also through repulsion. It's like yeah. I don't know. There is that exotic, and it happens here. It happens in Temple of Doom. There's a lot of Indiana Jones that happens in this movie. And so whether it was an influence or whether it was a ripoff, it was copacetic.
Yeah. And so Khan's trying to...
Please continue.
So Khan's trying to elicit some information from Bond. And, Bond's playing it cool and it's not really working. And then somebody comes to whisper to Khan's ear because somebody has arrived that he needs to talk to. So he's like, "Oh, we'll see you later, Mr. Bond." And he gets escorted back to his room. Of course, Bond isn't going to stay in his room. He uses a nifty watch to help break out, and he's sneaking around on the outside parapets. And it's General Orloff who has arrived via helicopter, and Bond sees him. And Orloff goes to greet Khan, and they go into this underground room, and they're talking, and Bond is secretly listening in with the aid of the watch, which lets him to tap in on the frequency of the Fabergé egg, because not only was it a tracking device, it was also it was like a radio, a little radio, so you could hear what they're talking about. And Orloff is expressing his distaste that they lost the egg in the first place. And he says that this egg has caused enough trouble. He picks it up and he just smashes it on the ground and steps on it, which is admittedly a bit odd. And Khan is upset, but he notices the tracking device, the radio thing there. And he's like, oh, and Khan just kind of picks it up and he wisely decides not to tell Orloff because he doesn't want Orloff to know that he's screwed up any more than he already has. And it is interesting that he broke it, I guess, because he decides he's just going to take the real one back to Russia because it's simply not worth the trouble anymore. And the fact that there's going to be an impromptu inventory check within a couple of days is something that bothers the art dealer there. And we realize that it's actually Khan who's been making the replicas. Orloff is stealing them and giving to them, but we don't know why yet. Now, never mind the complete absurdity of this plot, because one of the things that if you take something like a Soviet treasures or something that's not supposed to be up for auction to an auction house, first thing they're going to do is verify whether or not it's real. So they would have known immediately that first they would know if it was real from examining it. Secondly, they would know from calling the proper people that it's not even supposed to be up for auction. So it never really should have gotten for auction in the first place, which is what's really impossible about the plot of this movie. Part of what makes
no, it's not impossible. The thing is it's so convoluted that you need you need like a It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia map with pictures and string, is because I would assume, based on what we see, that Octopussy, Maud Adams, who we don't know yet, is the one who actually procured because the art dealer in the first scene says, we've been flooded with these jewels and these from a highly anonymous seller. I think the original seller is not Kamal Khan, it's Octopussy.
Right, but she's stealing these things, and the only way they've gotten things like the Fabergé egg is because Orlov has stolen them from Soviet museums and places. So,
right,
the fact that you can't sell something stolen at an auction, that's one of the first things they're going to check. And and that's why the replica guy who's working on the replicas was worried about this inventory check in 2 days, because obviously nobody else in the Russian government or in Russia besides Orlov is aware of these thefts, because he's the one orchestrating the thefts, whereas Octopussy, as we'll find out, she uses her circus trainer women. She's been a jewel thief her whole life, but she's also using the advantage of the circus train to help smuggle things. That's how Khan gets the stuff to Sotheby's, which I assume is the auction house where he was selling it, or whatever auction house it is. He's just able to get past all the border checks on the circus train. And so just that idea in general, that they're even able to auction these things, is especially when you think about the rarity of a Fabergé egg. It's like the minute Russia finds out that one of those is up for auction, it's like, wait, stop, But okay, the Bond logic.
And
things were weird.
I get it. Like, I think but it's all right. Keep going. Like, this is the part where I'm starting to go like, okay, so what?
Yeah. So Bond is, as we know, he's listening into this meeting, and for some reason the frequency is the same as Magda's hairdryer, and that interrupts what he's hearing, and that causes the transmitter to start whining, and causes, what's going on? And so Bond flees because he needs to get away, but he can't get back to his room, so he sneaks into this cellar, like a pantry cellar or whatnot. And Khan, meanwhile, finally goes to see Octopussy, and she's on an island palace. This is a real place. It's not just there for women, as said in the film. But he goes there, and he goes into Octopussy's room, and you don't get to see her. You just see the aquarium with the octopus, and I think you see at most her hands and part of her silk robe. And he's basically telling her what's going on, and she says, well, don't kill Mr. Bond. I want to see it. It's like, no, you shouldn't. We have to kill him. And she's like, no, don't kill him. And he's like, all right, but I think you're making a big mistake. And it's the epitome of that old phrase, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. So I don't know why Khan felt the need to tell her this now. It's like, if you don't think Bond's going to talk, well, he still thinks he's going to talk a little bit because their dinner got cut short, but it's like, do you really need to find out what Bond knows at this point? I mean, you got the egg back. The British obviously can't admit that they had it. So Orlov, of course, is not going to let him sell another fake. It was too risky, which is why he broke it. And Khan obviously was upset because he could have made a lot of money off that thing. But so it's kind of questionable why he even wants to bother interrogating him anymore at this point, especially since Mishka and Grishka killed 009 before he was able to get anywhere. And at this point in the film, they had falsely assumed that the replica was lost in the river. It's only because it wasn't until Bond showed up earlier that day at the backgammon table that he realized, oh shit, it wasn't lost in the river. And so it's point in all of this being that Khan really shouldn't have gone to ask her to tell her what's going on until after he killed James Bond. But no, he did before.
No, but the thing is that Kamal Khan still needs Octopussy to either, be the benefactor, or like he needs the lady army or something like.
Right, but it's not clear if she's even aware of Bond's involvement at this point.
Throughout this entire film, she has no clue what's going on.
Right, she has no. That's another thing. She never questions what. I think she just assumes, because they do mention later in the film their intention to sell the jewels in Zurich for $300 million. And I think she assumes they're going to split the money 3 ways, and that's why Orlov is helping them. Of course, it's not the reason. So anyway, Bond hides out in this pantry. Khan goes to tell Octopussy this, and she's like, no, you shouldn't kill him. He's like, you're making a mistake. Sure enough, the next morning they find out Bond's gone, and they don't know where he is. And he decides to sneak out by climbing into this this burlap sack in the morgue, because he was first inside the room with all the food in the pantry. He got covered in flour, and he snuck out into the separate room with all the bodies that they would get rid of. That was the part. That was the part
where I was just like, you are too old. Because I remember, and I don't know if it's just mind's eye, but like James Bond being at, hell, they did it in Moonraker. James Bond being somewhere that he's not supposed to be. And then when he finds out that he has to get out of there, he's sort of, stealthily cat burglars away. And I'm not referring to the Saint. I'm saying in general, with Connery, with Lazenby, with Moore, they've sort of like dun 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 backed away from a door. In this, Roger Moore awkwardly attempts to stand up on his old man knees, flails his arms, and waddles away like he's trying to get away from a crowded salad bar. And I'm like, you, sir, are too old to be Bond.
Well, he even does this when the thugs are trying to, they're throwing the bodies in this ditch outside the castle. And when Bond does this, he actually goes, "Mwah!" trying to scare them as if they're going to be dumb and think he's a ghost. And it kind of works. And he pulls the burlap sack off. He flees into the woods. And then, for some reason, in very short order, Khan and Gobinda and their other thugs start arranging this safari hunt where they're going to go hunt Bond. And it's like a segment from The Most Dangerous Game, basically.
Oh, no, this is Indiana. This is the beginning. They've just recreated the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark without any of the exciting bits. It's just the Jovitos or Jovitas.
The Jovitos.
Yes. Chasing Indiana Jones. That is all this is. It's the only reason it exists. It does not further anything. It gets in the way of a perfectly logical escape to the next plot point, which is what I wanted. But instead, I get a camel double take.
Right. And again, this screamed to me more of The Most Dangerous Game because they're literally hunting Bond on the island and they got their guns. And you have weird things happen, like the tiger jumps out and Bond just tells it to sit, and it does, because of course that works when you're confronted with an angry tiger. And at one point he swings through the branches and you hear the Tarzan yell, and I'm like, this is like the most Harry Saltzman point of the movie, and yet Harry Saltzman was not involved in the making of this film. You even have elephants involved in not exactly a stampede, but they are kind of charging around in the jungle. So Bond eventually gets to the shoreline and he swims out to this little boat. It's like a bunch of tourists are on there and they help him on board. And this dumb lady's like, "Are you with our group?" He's like, "No, ma'am, I'm with the economy tour."
Which is a great line. The only thing that I did sort of pucker a little bit, and I was like,
"Yeah."
Did I forget about a J.W. Pepper appearance? Oh no, what's gonna? Oh, thank God.
Yeah, and then when Khan sees this, he's just kind of sitting on the back of his elephant. He's like, "It seems Mr. Bond is a very rare breed, soon to be made extinct."
He's such a good villain. It's such a good actor.
Yeah, so Bond has gotten away, and Khan is like, okay, we're gonna deal with this. And then the next scene, see, what is the next scene? The next scene is
he gets back to Oh, this is the first time we've ever had a breakdown on the plot, Kat. This is your job. What's going on, lady?
A lot of these scenes kind of mash into each other. That's why
I know. There's no consequence to this. This is like watching those golden collections of Looney Tunes. This is like just watching them back to back to back. So I don't know.
So eventually, Bond and VJ get back together. Basically,
they do. They end up back together. If anyone knows in the chat what happens after the economy tour, let us know.
They get back together, and Bond, tells them what happened, I guess, and they decide that he decides he has to talk to this Octopussy person because VJ mentions the fact that that's what happened.
The island is full of women. Yeah,
I remember now. So the economy tour comes back to shore. Bond gets off, and VJ's there to greet him. He tells him what happened, and he says, "Well, what's over there?" And there's like, "Oh, well, that's the island. It's an island populated by women, no men allowed."
That's Themyscira.
Yes, and they go back. They're having this conversation back at Q Branch, as I remember. So they're talking about it, and he decides that he's going to have to sneak in there because that's where Magda is, and that's where Octopussy is. I can't remember for the life of me why he knows that that's important for him to go there. He just does.
Well, no, if her name is Octopussy, then obviously that's my little Octopussy. That connects Magda and Octopussy.
Right, but I can't remember where he heard the name Octopussy to know that was important.
From Magda when they were banging.
Right, she said that's my little Octopussy, but that didn't necessarily mean anything to VJ because he didn't mention that to VJ. But anyway,
Like I don't mean to be rude, but if I met a chick with an octopus rub-on tattoo and she was like, "That's my little Octopussy. Oh, by the way, there's this chick who owns an island and her name is Octopussy." I'd be like, "Huh."
yeah, so they talk about it, and Q decides to supply Bond with a way to sneak aboard to this island. It's a mechanical mini sub crocodile. It's like, okay, so
Where do his feet go? What the hell is up with that fucking gadget?
it makes no sense. And so it's like, is he lying on his stomach? It doesn't look like it the way his head kind of perks up through the mouth. It's just very weird.
But he did do this in Live and Let Die as well, didn't he? Because he threw away the cigar.
When he,
I'm mixing up things. I'm mixing up because I'm trying to
over the alligators.
This movie is such a mishmash of tropes and.
Q is sitting on the shoreline fishing and watching as Bond does this, and Bond sneaks onto this island of women, and you see Octopussy skinny dipping in the pool, and they provide her a towel. She goes back in and finds Bond in her room, and she doesn't sound the alarm at first, and she knows exactly who he is. Oh, James Bond, 007, License to Kill, and they have a discussion, and we realize that her father was Major Dexter Smythe.
Yes.
Apparently had been on a mission to North Korea to get some Chinese gold that had been stolen, but then he murdered his guide and absconded with the gold, sold it in China, exchanged it for some diamonds, apparently. And that's how Octopussy became a diamond smuggler. And 20 years later, Bond was tasked with bringing him in for court-martial, but Bond decided to give him the option to commit suicide. And this convoluted backstory is only there to explain why she doesn't immediately sound the alarm. Like, she has some respect, and I'm thinking, no, you wouldn't have respect for him. You would be like, okay, lady, she would be like, okay, Bond, if you just left him alone, he wouldn't have done that. You would have been living fine. So yeah, I'm going to kill you, but she doesn't. And so they're talking, and Bond steps behind a column to hide because he hears somebody knocking on the door, and in walks Khan. And he admits that
not Noonien Singh, not the good Khan.
Yeah, no. So Kamal Khan walks in, and he says they lost Bond, and he's about to blame it on her because she's the one who wanted Bond to remain alive. And all of a sudden, she's like, "Oh, well, I want to introduce you to my house guest." And Bond walks in. He's like, "Yes, seems to be a familial connection with us." And Khan's kind of upset. He kind of plays it cool, and he's like, "Okay, you got it." And she's like, "I'll handle Mr. Bond." And he's like, "Okay." So then he leaves, pretends to be cordial about it, but no sooner than he's out of the room, he kind of grimaces, like upset about this. And she decides to show Bond to his own room, and she's like, you could stay here for like a week because I'm going to be gone for a week on a circus trip, but you can come back. It'll be fine. Or don't come back. She's like, you stay here until I get back. It'll be fine. And show Mr. Bond to his quarters and that kind of thing. And meanwhile, Khan decides that he's going to take matters into his own hands. So rather than asking Govinda or somebody else to do, he goes to this sleazy place where these guys with like missing teeth and scars, and he pays them, and they're like, "No, we don't want any trouble with the woman." And he tosses an extra bag of coins. I'm like, okay. And he's like, the woman is not to be harmed. And you see this guy with what is an awesome, like spin saw yo-yo, the yo-yo thing, which people have made replicas of this, and it's awesome. I have to admit.
I don't like it.
I love it, and he actually tests it out by dropping it down below on Bond's photograph and cutting it up. And
then the man with one eye cackles maniacally.
Yes, and
I hate this thing. I think that this is a less subtle version, and especially when they come up with the yo-yo team where everyone has one. But like this is, remember when Aki died, and they had the string with the.
Only the one guy has it.
No. Multiple dudes have this when they get to the big fight.
I only saw the one guy using it, and then he fell down onto the bed, and the other guys grabbed it.
Oh, maybe that's what happened. Maybe I lost track of the yo-yo saw.
Right. So, meanwhile, back at the shoreline, Q is relieved of duty by VJ, who's going to take the next watch. And and VJ's like, "Have you seen anything?" And Q just laughs at him. He's like, "What? You kidding? Bond on an island populated exclusively by women? We won't see him till dawn." And he's like, "Well, I'll come back to relieve you at midnight." And VJ's like, "Okay." And he stays there to watch. And Bond and Octopussy have another conversation, and she kind of gets upset with him for she isn't like totally forgiving. She's a little upset with him in the way he's like, asserting himself about, what's this all about. And she doesn't want to talk. She doesn't want to mention, she plays ignorance that she doesn't know who 009 is or why he had the Fabergé egg. And she
knows nothing about it.
Yeah. So which is actually true. And so she storms off into her bedroom, and Bond follows her and does another oddly Sean Connery type thing where he grabs her and starts forcibly kissing her. And she's like, no. And then she just gives in, and she's like, no, I want to be in charge. So she kisses him, and they start making out on the bed. And meanwhile, back across the shoreline, we see.
But it's the most rapey seduction in the history of James Bond. It's like he goes in, he assaults her, and I know we've covered it's from a different time and all this jazz. And then she's like, no. And then he does it again, and then she's like, she says some non sequitur, and I don't even remember what it was because I was like, are you serious? And then he says something that is a complete non sequitur to her non sequitur. And I'm like, how did this happen? And then all of a sudden they're coital. And I'm just like, this is worse than fucking Pussy Galore.
I thought the one from Thunderball was worse, but
which one? Domino?
No, the nurse lady at the facility.
Well, yeah, no, you gotta put. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Okay, so second.
Yeah, and how she just totally comes around to liking him because he has a mink glove to massage her with. So they're kissing, and then we cut back to the shoreline, and VJ hears something. And he puts his fishing rod down, he's looking, and this guy leaps up out of the water. He must be really great at holding his breath for a long time. Two other guys jump around, and they're holding him in place, and Gobinda comes down the steps on the dock, which, how he could have been up there on the dock without VJ seeing him, I have no idea. It makes no sense. And so Gobinda looks up, and VJ looks up, and he sees the guy with the yo-yo saw, and Gobinda gestures, and they doom it. And then we cut back to...
Wait a second, and this is why I don't like the saw. Hello, Tiki Fire. This is why I don't like the saw, is because you got 5 guys, right?
About.
So, use a knife. You got to get 2 guys to hold his arm, 1 guy who's supervising, and is be like, guy from up there. Yo-yo saw this man. Oh, it's like, no, just stab him. Use a silencer. This doesn't make any sense. And again, I think it's totally Poison ripoff from Aki.
Scott, have you ever seen a James Bond film?
Oh, shut your head.
Do villains ever kill people in a simple, logical way in a Bond film?
Okay, you have a valid point.
Yeah, so the cut happens right as the saw's about to cut into his head, and we see all the birds flapping away, and even Octopussy's birds in the bird cages freak out, and it wakes up Bond, and he's like, oh, okay, just go sleep there. And then we see that it's actually an interesting transition because we cut right from the birds flocking away and Bond waking up to it to the guys being in their room. And he gets the saw, and he douses it, and Bond pushes Octopussy out of the way and himself at the last second as this thing bisects the bed. And then he yanks on the cable from the saw. He pulls the guy down. He falls over, and she runs out of the room, and he starts punching some of the guys. Another guy gets the saw and comes at him, and they start beating each other up. And then Octopussy's security comes in, and they're dressed in like these really skin tight red, like spandex outfits with like a weird belt.
Thing 1 and thing 2, yes.
Yeah, it's very weird. And Bond ends up getting the last goons in the throat. They get thrown out the window into the water, and Octopussy pulls a pistol and is about to fire at them, and she can't really see where she's going to fire and they don't surface again, and she's not like suspicious about that at all. And you do see the crocodile brook thing nearby that I guess Bond snuck back into to escape. Rather than doing what would have been logical, which is getting back on the shore and saying to her, okay, you believe me now? It's like there's something weird going on here, and they ain't just, it wasn't the locals trying to kill me. It's probably your boyfriend, Khan. But he doesn't do that. He just leaves. And he gets back to shoreline and finds Q there. And Bond's like, where's VJ? And he shows him. And he's like, he was alive when I found him. All he said was, it was Kamal's men. So then we cut back to London. And Bond updates. Or not
Meanwhile,
London,
back at the clubhouse.
It's actually back in Berlin, West Berlin. And Bond updates M as to what happened. And M's like, okay, you're going to go undercover as you're going to go to furniture factories and you're here to purchase like furniture. And it's like, okay, well, weird cover, but okay. And they drop him at the border, or they don't drop him. They get out of the car at the border, and he's going to go across to, because Bond had discovered while snooping around Octopussy's room that their next circus performance was going to be at the army base there. So Bond crosses the border, and meanwhile, Octopussy's circus train is coming along, and Khan and Octopussy and General Orloff are there. Bond is kind of sneaking or snooping around outside the train, and he overhears the conversation, and they apparently plan to sell all these jewels that Orlov has just brought to sell them in Zurich for $300 million. And presumably Octopussy thinks they're going to split it 3 ways. It's great. And Bond decides to get on the train where the jewels have been smuggled onto instead of staying with them. He gets on the train by way of crawling under the tracks and grabbing onto like the bars under the actual train. And it hooks up with the train engine. Yeah, it hooks up with the engine, takes it down a side tunnel, and in the tunnel we find Gobinda in another one of the circus trains, and you see this guy, and you can't see exactly what he's doing. He's like welding something, and you see the sparks flying. It's like, oh, what's going on? And that's when the switch happens. And inside we have this Soviet guy, Soviet general colonel or whatever, and he's showing Gobinda how this atomic bomb works. Russian circus was a huge deal in the Soviet. Yes. And so he's showing him how the bomb works. And he's like, it'll have a 4-hour delay, but be sure to be at least 20 miles away when it goes off. He's like, oh, okay. So leave the thing here, and they're going to smuggle it in at a later time. And they hook up the train to other carts. So it's kind of getting a bit, but this is where I kind of like this section of the movie, because at this point I'm wondering, what exactly do they think is going to happen? Like, what is their plan? Like, because she's clearly not in on it.
No.
So it's like,
well, she's going to be dead from the nuclear retaliation or not even retaliation. She's going to be dead from the explosion from the train.
Yeah. And so Orlov shows up, and the bomb has been smuggled in. Well, the bomb hasn't been smuggled in yet. Actually, they go to the first circus showing at the first outpost, wherever it is, and you see them all having fun at the circus, and Bond actually goes to that circus, and he sees that Khan and Orlov and which is funny that Orlov is there. I guess that makes sense. It's the east side. You see the Americans they're watching, and he sneaks out around the side. At one point he actually has to disguise himself from Magda, and he does so by hiding behind this rather fat gentleman who gets up to leave, and he just hides behind him to skulk on out of here, and he decides to join the train bit again. And now that they're on the east side, that's where the bomb is actually going to be loaded on another uncoupled cart. And so Orlov goes in to make the final inspection, and Bond corners him, pulls a gun on him, and he's like, drop it in general, hands behind you. And he's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, who the hell are you? And he's like, I'm British Secret Service. And he's like, you should be worried about how you're going to get out of here alive. He's like, I am worried about an atomic bomb exploding on a United States Air Force base. And he's like, what, are you crazy? He's like, you think that the Americans aren't going to retaliate? And Orlov's like, against whom? And Bond's like, and I actually like that line, because it's like, and Bond's like, oh, of course, everybody will assume it was a nuclear accident, which will expedite the anti-nuclear sentiments, expedite disarmament, and you'll just come steamrolling across the border. For the record, that wouldn't happen for a myriad of reasons, but
but also, like, it's kind of, it is a no more nukes sentiment that was prevalent at the time. Like, we are talking 1983. I wouldn't say the height of the Cold War, the waning days of the Cold War. Like, we're within a decade of the end, less than a decade of the end of the Cold War. And the days of duck and cover and nuclear fear, or what do they call it? Nuclear scare?
Yeah.
Like, I think it is somewhat plausible and also somewhat prescient.
Yeah, so meanwhile, this guard shows up, and Bond has to spin around and shoot him, and it's a really weird shot looking thing. So he shoots this guy. Orlov gets out the back, and he starts screaming, kill him, kill him. And I'll start firing, and Bond has to flee, and he gets up, and he steals Orlov's car and starts driving off. And at one point, his tires get cut because he drives across some spike strip, and he pulls his car onto the train tracks to start chasing the train. And Orlov he gets in another car, and he has his bus stop at the train tracks, and he's like, follow that car. And then the chase begins, and one of the guys working the train yard sees the car coming, and he hits the switcher, which actually is beneficial to Bond because it allows his car to catch up alongside the train. And just as he sees another train barreling from the other side, Bond jumps onto the circus train at the last second, and he's trying to get away, and there's like this big fight going on. You're racing basically to try and get on board, and Gobinda ends up seeing what's going on up here, and they get in a fight. He doesn't fall off the train or anything, but the twins get up there and start fighting him. And at one point, Bond actually falls off the train. And it's funny because when they filmed this bit where Bond was hanging off the side and having to avoid the posts that were going to get hit, the stunt guy nearly got killed doing this, which is, again, appreciation that they do this stuff for real.
Mm-hmm.
So Bond and the twins get thrown off the train, and then you have this vague repeat of the beginning of the film, except Bond's not in clown makeup this time. He's in one of the other twins' outfits.
Either Zaymod or Tomax. I don't know which one.
Yeah, he knocked Misha or Grishka, knocked him unconscious with the cannon in one of the...
I wish you'd play along with my G.I. Joe role play.
Yeah, when he invaded Orloff. And so, see, I already watched this movie just a few minutes ago, and I'm already forgetting because of the weird lot. I can't remember all the scenes that go together. So
it's cool.
They're running through the woods, and they're chasing him, and he gets to this shed. And Nishka's going to come in and stab him, and Bond just kind of... Nishka doesn't know that the door's already, like, open. Bond's just holding it tight with his hand behind the door handle. So that way when he lunges to try and stab him, Bond just leans back, and the door flies open, and he tumbles, and Bond just stabs him. And he's like, that's for 009. I wasn't aware that because Mishka's like, this is for my brother. And that's when he killed... And I wasn't aware his brother was dead because Bond just knocked a cannon on him. And I guess the concussion killed him.
No, and you know what? I did appreciate that fact because when the cannon hit him in the head, I was like, okay, so you're dead.
Yeah, he's probably dead.
And so but James is wearing either Zaymod or Tomax's clothes. So it's like, if you're wearing my brother's clothes, you clearly killed my brother.
Yes, and I forgot to mention that's the part where Bond also disguised himself in a gorilla suit. Briefly.
Oh my God.
Yes, and the bomb.
Yes, there is a part where.
Okay, so I got to back up. So now I remember what happened. So Bond. Yeah, so he crossed the border. He first went to the circus. He saw that on the East German side. He snuck onto one of the trains and hid in the back. He saw them place the bomb on the car. He saw that they were already working on the. When they first crossed the border, that's where he saw them working on the bomb in the secret compartment. Then he went to the first circus. Then the train kicked off. He gets into another side cart, and that's where he saw Gobinda actually place the bomb in the cannon. And Bond knocked out Vishka with the cannon, and he got rid of Orloff. And at one point, he was in a gorilla suit, and Gobinda cut the gorilla's head off with his sword because he had the need to scream and shout, like, and, kind of hit him. I can't even remember the order of those scenes. I'm getting confused. Yes, it is easy to get confused in a movie that has 3 climax scenes. That is true. So anyway, long story short, Bond killed the other twin. That's for 009. He takes off and he first tries to flag down these teenagers which are driving down on the road, and they slow down to let him in, and then they're like, ha ha, and they start speeding off without him. Like, you motherfuckers. They're all going to die.
James Bond tries to hitchhike in this film, and no one will pick him up because he's dressed like a circus knife thrower.
Well, we see that at one point he does get picked up by this couple, and they're offering him food and stuff. He's like, no, thank you. And they eventually get to some town square or whatever to get gasoline. Bond wants to get on the phone to call the authorities, and this lady's there. She, rather than just grab her and throw her out, he instead decides to just steal her car. And there happens to be a cop who's there, so the cop gets in the cop car, and it's like a police chase. And at one point, he passes Gobinda and Khan because they've since bid goodbye to Octopussy. And what she doesn't know is that they've taken the container of all the jewels that she had previously seen put on the hidden inside the circus cannon, which we know had since been switched with the atomic bomb. And so they're taking off, driving, and at one point they see Bond do this hairpin turn right in front of them with the cops chasing him, and Gobinda's like, "It's Bond," and Khan's like, let him go. He'll be late, and we'll be gone. He will be out of our hair. And he's like, "Oh, okay." So Khan and Gobinda keep on driving away. Bond drives this stolen car through the border of the USAF military base, and at one point he has to duck into a trailer to hide from
murderers.
I forgot the other part of the climax where Orloff had been chasing them in the car, and because he couldn't drive on the railway track, he ends up driving to one of the checkpoints and runs across the American checkpoint trying to catch the train. And of course, even though he's a general, it doesn't matter, and they shoot at him and.
No, at this point, because one of the army guys found because the car had crashed into the ocean or into a river, and they had found the bucket of jewels, and it was like, so now everyone who is sort of a Russian soldier is like he's a capitalist. Yeah,
because Gogol had since figured out that. There was something up with the jewels because, like the guy said, the inventory check was coming in 2 days. And
so I don't even think Gogol knows about the bomb.
No, he doesn't know about the bomb, but he knows that Orloff is up to something and is involved in theft, and that's why he was there when that car got destroyed when the train, because I mentioned the guy switched the train tracks, and so the car went on to stop its track, and when Bond jumps on the train, the other train hits the car, knocking into the river, and they got the jewels. And so just as Orloff is running across the border, Gogol lands in his helicopter, but he's not there in time to stop the guards from shooting Orloff. And he runs up there to see Orloff crawling along. Well, I thought this was a pretty good scene. He's got all the bullets in his back, and he's crawling along, desperately trying to catch this train. And he looks at him. He's like, "Oh, you comrade!" And he's like, "Tomorrow, I will be a hero of the Soviet Union." And then he dies. And Gogol's like, "Wait, what?" And he looks at the train as it's leaving, and it's too late because the gates are being closed as it just crossed onto the American side. And so at the circus, Octopussy, she's wheeling in the cannon. They're getting ready to do the circus performance, and Bond, who is driven through onto the base with all the police chasing him, ditches the car, runs by the trailers, passes a guy with a couple monkeys, and ducks into one of the trailers. And in a matter of seconds, he puts on this clown outfit and this elaborate clown face makeup and looks just like 009 from the beginning, which admittedly makes you think that he's probably makes you think that this might not go very well for him. Except this time he sneaks into the circus and he gets grabbed by one of the circus performers. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's your you get up there now." So they shove him into the ring, and he spots Octopussy and Magda and the American colonel or American general there standing.
Oh, by the way, what a crossover of Imperials and rebels, because we have oh my God, Moff.
I know which one you're talking about. It's the guy that Vader chokes out because he insults him, saying, "Oh, we don't need
in the first Star Wars." Yeah, exactly. Your faith in that ancient religion won't save you, whatever. But then we also get General Reichian from the rebel base on Hoth, and they're sitting side by side, clapping, enjoying this terrible, terrible movie.
And so the Bond runs up to him and he tries to tell him there's a bomb on there, and of course Riken is like, "Oh, of course there is," and he's like, "Oh, damn it, will you tell him who I am?" And he looks at Octopussy and she's like, "What?" And I like how it's funny that all he does is pull off the clown nose and take off the hat as if that reveals. He's like, "Kamal's double crossed you." She's like, "What?" He's taking the jewels and he's running, and she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh, forget it." So he runs towards the cannon, and the American, Riken is like, "Oh, stop him!" And so they send the soldiers in there to try and stop Bond, and he grabs an axe and he's trying to break open the back of the cannon where the hidden chamber is, and they're pulling him away. And he's like, "God damn it, there's a bomb in there!" And you hear people screaming.
This is the first time that I've ever seen James Bond plead.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and it's like, man,
interesting is a word. Interesting is a word.
I mean, it's interesting in the sense that the movie has come to this point.
Yeah.
And Octopussy decides that, okay, maybe there's something to this. And so which is interesting that she actually thinks that he might be telling the truth, because after all, she thought he died back in India. And so she pulls a gun out of one of the soldiers' holsters and she shoots the lock on this compartment, and they see, oh, well, there is a bomb in there. It says 14 seconds on the timer. Riken waits 4 seconds before saying, "Let him go." And so Bond runs down there with 10 seconds left. He starts carefully removing the core of the bomb, and he does it in the nick of time when there's like a second left or something, or 3 seconds left. And then the Riken's like telling everybody to shut up, and he gets the bomb out, and he's like, "Oh, you're all safe now. You can go back to your families." And he gives the bomb to them, and people are congratulating him, and it seems very calm and jovial considering that he just disarmed an atomic bomb at a circus. And
in the same method that he took apart the bomb in The Spy Who Loved Me, which means that not only has this movie referenced every James Bond movie before, but it's referenced James Bond movies from 3 movies ago. Like, this is literally what happens when you get a best of tape.
Yeah, and so in Magda, or Octopussy turns to Magda. She's like, where was Khan going? And she's like, "I don't know, back to India." And so they skulk away. And this is another ridiculous thing. How is it that now that the Americans on the American base see an atomic bomb here, they know Bond is telling the truth, this bomb was smuggled in on the circus train, and they don't detain everybody and have a big investigation. They just, they let him go. They just kind of get away. And the fact that,
like, do Geiger counters exist?
Yeah, and then particularly for the Cold War, and so, well, I mean, there are supposed to be bombs on this base, which is I guess would cut that out. But what's weird about this?
That's a good point.
So the movie now has this addendum added where we go back to India. And Khan is packing up to leave. And I feel there's a scene missing here because there's no scene of Khan and Govinda realizing that the mission has failed. Because presumably, if the plan had gone down as planned, he wouldn't have to run away. He'd just stay back at the palace. Oh, it's a tragedy, blah, blah, blah. But he's actually emptying the safe and like, oh, we got to go. And he's like, what's that noise outside? And Govinda looks. He's like, oh, it's just some girls selling themselves to the men. And Khan's like, good, that'll keep him distracted while we get away. And he's like, get the horses ready. And but then we see these women are Octopussy's circus girls, and they sneak in and they stealthily move about and take people out, and then all of a sudden it escalates into all-out chaos.
But this is where I got the most angry with this movie, is that we've got a girl ninja army,
Yeah,
and you decide to introduce them in 7 minutes before the end of the movie.
that's right, because she did mention to Bond when he was on her island that this octopus cult, she picks up these lost women and will train them to be fighters or will train them to be thieves, and they need spiritual guidance. And it's like, you're pulling from all sorts of weird movies or other things, and this has really nothing to do with anything. And so
as far as I can tell, all you're doing is making a mint on red uniforms.
Yeah, so they help her get up this what looks like a fireman's pole like thing to get up to the balcony. She sees that Khan is there with Govinda, and he orders him to get the horses ready, get some saddles. He's like, okay. And then she walks in and pulls a gun on him, and she's like, oh, I can't believe you were going to kill all those innocent people, blah, blah, blah. And Khan's just playing it cool. He's like, Octopussy, Octopussy. And I just like, how can we not be bursting out laughing if they're saying this? And so it's just...
but I do have to give credit. Louis Jourdain does say Octopussy better than anyone else on...
He does.
Ever.
Yeah. But then he quickly... knocks the gun out of her hand, and then the guards come in. They seize her. He's like, keep her. She's our ticket out of here. And then out of the blue, Bond and Q show up in an air balloon because, of course, the Americans didn't notify the Indian military and say, hey, you have an exiled Afghan prince here who just tried to blow this place to start World War III or whatever. No, we're just going to go in on a little blimp or on a hot air balloon and hope all is best. So,
excuse me, Bond, do you happen to have a dirigible?
Yes, so they're flying over the palisade walls, and Bond sees Khan taking Octopussy away, so he leaps up onto the balcony. Q keeps maneuvering it for a landing, and he sees that one of the guards has his guns, AK-47, trained on a group of the girls, and he navigates it to knock this guy over, and they're so happy, and they all flock Q and are flaunting him, and he's like, oh, we don't have time for that now. And they all start kissing him, and he's
maybe later.
Maybe later. And
Major Boothroyd is a pimp.
Yeah, so Bond takes off out front and grabs a horse and takes off after them. And this is where the film cuts from India to what looks like New Mexico, where the plane is parked. And the plane's taking off. Bond rides on his horse, and he gets there at the last second to grab onto the tail. Again, this is real stunts they're doing, where the plane's flying in the air. Looks, I think it was in Southern California, where they took off like from New Mexico. They're flying in SoCal near the Mojave or Grapevine or something like that. And they're flying in the air. You see that it's obviously not Roger Moore. It's another stunt guy, but I'll forgive it because it's just so awesome that they're doing this for real. Mm-hmm. Octopussy's kind of tied up inside the back of the plane, and Govinda is sitting up in the front with Khan, and he's like, sir, and he points, and we see that Bond is out on the wing, and he's opened the turbine compartment and pulled the wires, causing the prop to stop. And he's like, go get him. And Govinda's like, what, out there? Something they'll repeat in the next movie as well. And so Govinda, reluctant. I love that line from Govinda. I thought it was one of the funniest lines in the movie. Out there, for a guy who's always so stoic and intimidating, and even he's scared of this. But he goes outside and gets on the plane, and you have some awesome stunt work again. And Bond ends up stopping him by pulling the antenna back on the top of the plane and fucking it in this guy's face to give severe whiplash. And Govinda falls off the plane to his death. To
recreate the opening of Moonraker unsuccessfully.
Yes, so then Bond gets inside the plane, he unties Octopussy, and he waits just as Khan is trying to make an emergency landing, because they only have the one prop running. And he's trying to land on this cliff, and he slows it down just enough for Bond and Octopussy to jump out of the plane. And she tumbles over the cliff, but he grabs onto her real tight. And Khan didn't get the plane to stop in time, so he goes over the cliff, and you have a bad audio lip sync job of the Wilhelm scream as he's like, ah! And the plane crashes into the mountainside and blows to smithereens. And he pulls Octopussy up, and it's like, oh, yay. And we cut back to MI6 where General Gogol is there. He's like, officially, my government denies the event ever occurred. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's not how it would actually go down. It's like, yeah, really, one of your rogue generals smuggled an atomic bomb, and you always say, yeah, no. But
Yeah,
so,
sorry.
and he asks a favor. He's like, oh, if you found, the Romanov star, which is one of the other jewels they were gonna steal, something, another one of the fakes that Orlov, crushed. And so they're like, oh yes, and they present him with a star, and he's like, oh, very happy, and they're like, oh, where's Commander Bond? I'd like to thank him, and oh, he's apparently too injured still. He can't travel yet. We'll be joining him later. So then we cut back to the Ganges River outside Octopussy's palace, and we see her boat, her private, schooner boat there, and Bond's in a cast with his legs strung up in the bed, and she's like, "Oh, James, I can just imagine what we could be doing if it weren't for your leg." And there's no reason for him to still be playing injured when he's on the boat anyway, but whatever. And so he just cuts the cord and the leg. He's fine. And she's like, fine. Oh, James. And then they start embracing and making out as they keep rowing, and what would be a better ending for the Bond character than the one they come up with for the end of Roger's era in the next one. And that's the end of Octopussy. And again, I swear it's not a porn film, despite the name.
Well, at this point, I've lost all playfulness with the name Octopussy. While I will agree that it is one of the most titillating and wonderful sort of double entendres that isn't a double entendre, it is something. If Octopussy beat Never Say Never Again, it's because of the brilliant marketing machine of using the title Octopussy, because it's always been a euphemism, pussy, right? Yeah. It's part of the reason why Pussy Galore was such a hot button name.
Right. So with this movie, it's very ridiculous and over the top. We did have a conversation about who the main villain arguably is, and I argued it would be General Orlov because he's the one who stood to gain the most. It was his plan. He just had to find the jewelry smugglers who would help him do it. Whereas Khan, they never really say it out loud, but it seems like his only motive was money, because he was just going to sell the jewels at auction to make more money. And it's like, excuse me, you're already an exiled Afghan prince with your whole palace. You're not hurting for money, and all you're doing is... And it's not like he's getting any power from this, like, say, Goldfinger or Zoran, who, aside from getting their filthy rich, would have a lot of power if their plans were to go off without a hitch. But Khan is really getting nothing else except for money, and it's like, okay, it just... I mean, I really like...
That's all that Octopussy was going to get.
Well, she didn't know about the bomb and how and all of that kind of stuff. She just thought it was,
Doesn't mean she wasn't complicit in aiding and abetting the nuclear explosion on an American airbase.
Yeah, she was. And I really like Louis Jourdan in this role. I like the character, even though the plot is completely ridiculous. Like I said,
Agreed.
The cartoonish nature of General Orlov, who gives it, dials it up to 11 in this movie. And I admit, I really do like the East German climax portion of the film. Like, I think that's where all the suspense and everything kicks in, where you're trying to figure out what is the plan. I thought, while the expounding logic of what Orlov is trying to do is incredibly stupid, the notion that he thinks, so who are they going to retaliate against and stuff, like, okay, that's a little bit clever. I like the suspense built in there of all of that, as silly as it gets. But I've always felt that the India part of the climax is sort of tacked on. It's just kind of this weird thing, like you mentioned. What's with all the ninjas? It's basically there to, oh, look, it's titillating. It's hot girls, beating people. It's like, okay. And then the airplane,
which I'm fine with, but if that had been, like, the movie is called Octopussy, and if it had been a gateway of Magda getting to Octopussy with, like, there's, like, why do we not get more of the organization? And what the hell do you mean, Octopussy, that you diversified into circuses and carnivals? Now, I know Tiki Fire's Retro Clubhouse said that it was a Russian thing in the era, and it was a thing that they did, but it's just like, is that an investment that you make?
Well, yeah, because I was under the impression that's how she was performing her smuggling operation. She just get the jewels, they have the handoff and put it on the train and hide it in those compartments, and that's how they were smuggling things, getting it across all the borders.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think that My biggest frustration with this movie, and the reason that you've heard my creaking chair, the reason I've been smoking more, is because everything about this is just like actors good, because their performances are great. Roger Moore's still too old, but he's being Roger Moore. I think Magda is absolutely gorgeous, and it's nice to see that she didn't die.
It's true.
I like Maud Adams very much. I didn't think it took away. I even had a little bit of a hope, an inkling that maybe she would be Andrea Anders from before. But no, it's fine. It's fine.
You mean in terms of like a personality?
Well, no, in terms of it even being the same character, like there was some like no, there's no sentiment. This is no acknowledgement. This is like playing.
Well, Miss Anders was killed. If you,
I know that, but so is James Bond at this point.
I also thought it was weird that I never liked the plane part of the climax. I mean, I like the stunts that they did were cool. It just seems like they were setting things up where she was going to be the one to kill Khan.
I'm not kidding. It looks like a recreation of a different version of the beginning of Moonraker.
Right, it is. It's like from Moonraker, one of the most riveting scenes people were expounded upon was the whole skydiving thing. It's like, oh, well, let's just do that again, but at the end of the movie.
Which we've already seen. Like, there's so much in this movie that we've already seen.
Here's the thing. I feel that the plot would not be anywhere near as complicated and ridiculous if they just got rid of Octopussy and the cult and the whole circus train. Get rid of all of that. Because really, she doesn't provide anything to the plot other than the method for which they will be smuggling the bomb. She doesn't even get to do much in the climax because, I mean, even Bond doesn't get to do anything. Like when when the hot air balloon comes over the palace, he jumps on the balcony and Khan and Govinda have already taken Octopussy and are already on their way out the door. And it's like he doesn't really do much there, and she doesn't really get to do anything to stop Khan. It's like, did you need to have the big battle at the castle with no. And so it is like leaning into self-parody. I thought it was odd that she is sort of somewhat of a bystander in her own movie. I mean, they keep her off screen for quite a long time, which admittedly is unique to do that for the fact that they're deliberately building up mystique for her as opposed to the main villain of the film. But the fact that, again, she doesn't really get to do anything in the climax. And it says something, I think, when the first part of your climax that takes place in an entirely different country that takes up nearly half hour is much more exciting and much better than the addendum that is the actual climax of the film.
Well, and also, there's no reason for any chemistry to happen between Octopussy and James Bond. Also, I really appreciate the fact that we've said climax so many times about a movie called Octopussy. But
I did like VJ. I liked him a lot.
VJ's amazing. He's a breath of fresh air. He's a very charismatic presence on screen. I like how they incorporated a lot of his, like, he would have been best well known at the time for his tennis prowess. And I like how they incorporated as a tongue-in-cheek wink to the audience. I think VJ is a wink to the audience all in all. That's why he gets away with playing the Bond theme on the flute.
Yeah, and yes, I mean, I like the setting of India and the fact that they went to Udaipur and you get to see the city. That's very beautiful. The palaces as well are kind of beautiful, and it's just that, and I like the film's attempt at trying to be an espionage story because it does take you a while to figure out what's going on.
Oh, it tries.
It tries. It's just that the way they do it is so ridiculous. Like, you would have been better off just having it be like a low-key jewelry caper type film with the fact that it's the Russian jewels being, the royal jewels, so to speak, being stolen, having much bigger implications.
But even then, coming off of, like, also one of the advantages of doing this show with you is being able to watch these somewhat in order. I know we took a divergence off into Daniel Craig, but like to go from Connery to Lazenby to Moore and see the progression. And it's like, when I was watching this, I was thinking back, it's like, okay, last time on James Bond, and now what are we doing? And it's like, oh, we're doing everything from James Bond now.
Yeah, and I did admit that I kind of like that they took the Ian Fleming title, Property of a Lady, and snuck it in there at some point. I liked that, the whole idea of driving up the bid to piss off the enemy Sounds like
Mm-hmm.
something that real Ian Fleming would have done, because he said his inspiration for Casino Royale came when he was in Portugal during the war, or after the war rather, and he saw these German guys playing, and he, being the fantasy person that he was, and he fantasized that these might be German agents, and he wanted to go bankrupt them at poker, and he failed miserably. So the idea of the art expert the MI6's art expert getting excited at the idea of driving up the bid at the auction, I'm like, that sounds like something Ian Fleming would do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's totally off of the bridge game from Moonraker.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same kind of idea. Tiki Fire, I have not read the short story.
Oh yeah, it doesn't really barely does. I thought sneaking the title in there was kind of neat,
but I think you're absolutely correct in terms of it would be a better movie if they removed Octopussy as the title and the character and the Lady Ninja Army, or you go straight, like, eliminate everything else.
Yeah, or you make it a Cold War story where it's a jewelry smuggling operation where the thief is stealing things from the Kremlin and trying to frame the West, which would be very, like, you don't need the bomb and the cartoonish general at that point. That could be a good espionage story, in its own right. That
still a Roger Moore movie, so
yeah, still a Roger Moore movie, but it wouldn't be nearly as over the top as this one is.
But I think if you called the movie a property of a lady and then referred to the Fabergé eggs as such as the MacGuffin, movie would work. But everything about this movie just seems to be too much. I was getting, I don't know, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin vibes from this. I'm surprised that first Roger Moore reprised the role after this, and I'm surprised this is the moment where every trope that you've seen in an Austin Powers movie happens. Like, if you don't have time to watch the Austin Powers trilogy, watch Octopussy, and it made me angry.
Yeah, I admit for some reason I do get mild enjoyment out of this film. Maybe it's the setting, the fact that it's not even trying, it's just way over the top, and VJ is awesome, and Gobinda is awesome, and I like Khan. It's just,
I love all the
again, the whole Berlin part of the climax I really liked. In the beginning, I was on board with it until they went to India, and the whole, like you said, the whole the whole Jovito's segment started. That's where, I mean, as a little kid, I found it hysterical and funny, and this movie is really fun. Watching it now, it's like, okay, that's where it stops. Even though they already had a few missteps up to that point.
Yeah, but I'm okay with a couple of missteps in a James Bond movie. But at that point, I was just like, I don't even know what you're trying to do. Like, I don't even know.
This film made $187 million at the box office. Pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not saying. Hey, I'm thankful that they survived.
Yeah, they survived. They didn't go under.
There's still a lot to come, but this is also, like, I was not anticipating my very emotional response towards the negative when it came to any of these movies. And watching the movie, watching Octopussy, it made, like, I don't think I'm ever going to revisit this movie ever again.
I agree the film is terrible from the screenwriter, all that stuff, but I find it really fun. I do enjoy this tension and suspense at times, and some of the characters. It's just odd, It's just like, what is this movie trying to be? I'm not sure. It's trying to do all sorts of things at once. Like I said, it feels like some critic might have written a poor review for For Your Eyes Only, saying this is a bit stale and bland for Roger, and like, oh well, let's just overdo everything in this one,
But that's so funny, is because the last week when
let's try it out, Harry Saltzman. Outdo Harry Saltzman.
Well, yeah, no, and you're absolutely. This is a kitchen sink movie. This is everything, every James Bond, and I was anticipating not liking For Your Eyes Only because it was going to be the pared down, more grounded, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't remember liking this as a kid, and I loved it. And this one, I was like, all right, maybe I was wrong about this one too. And no, I was totally right. Anyway, do you have martinis?
You go first.
Well, first things first, and this is somewhere in the future, but I owe a huge apology to Die Another Day.
Careful there, Captain.
Oh, I didn't see what he said.
No. I was talking. I was talking.
Me.
Yeah.
I'm going to. Oh my God.
Martinis. Added interest. You go first.
Well, I'm giving Octopussy. And when we revisit, I will change my review of Diamonds Are Forever, but I'm at this point, I'm going to have to give it a 2.
What did you give Diamonds Are Forever?
A 2, but it's going to go up to a 3 when we revisit it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember some of my other ratings. I know.
Do you want to recap?
Yeah, what did I get? I know I gave one of them a 4. I can't remember which one that was.
Spectre.
Okay, I gave that a 4.
Yeah.
What did I give 3s to?
On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
God, this is a terrible movie, but I do enjoy it.
It's fine. It's cool. A lot of people do, and I'm not besmirching, nor am I trying to shit on anyone's happy. This is just my opinion.
Yeah, it's bad, but I enjoy it enough to give it maybe a 4. 4 martinis.
You're giving it a 4. All right.
It's entertaining. It's entertaining as ridiculous and dumb as it is. But as a Logic Bond movie, it gets a 0.
I would rather watch You Only, or no, I would rather watch Never Say Never Again.
Oh yeah, I think that's agreed for the most part. People bag on that movie a lot, and it's like, the Bond company Eon brags about how this movie won the Battle of the Bonds. I'm like, I don't know if you want to brag about that, because it's like when I gave Spectre a 4, that's because there's so many problems with that, but I still find it watchable and somewhat enjoyable. And again, I think it's also because the climax of this movie is drawn out like a pretty long time. It's like nearly a 50-minute climax once he goes across the border, and it just takes off from there. But maybe I should I'll just give it a 4 for now, and I'll probably change it later. Like I always do, make it lower, like a 3.5 or a 4.
Yeah, makes sense. And maybe I just got frustrated with the pastiche, and I enjoyed the evolution, and I was disappointed with how every subsequent Roger Moore movie was getting better and better. And I was like, oh, I know where it ends. Like I know where Roger Moore's tenure completes.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's not that you're being sour. You're right. This is a bad movie in almost every way. But while I acknowledge that the script of For Your Eyes Only is a much better movie, up to a point, I enjoy this one more.
Okay.
But I think I gave For Your Eyes Only a 5 as a Bond film. This one as a Bond film gets a 4 because it is self-parody, but it's still somewhat like I could still pop this one in and watch it and turn off my brain and get entertained by it. Where the ones below that is just I can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, shall we see what is up with the chat? We've been checking in, and I just wanted to acknowledge and say ahoy. Todd Michael was here, and he gave a big yo. And Tiki Fire's Retro Clubhouse, I absolutely like. Tiki Fire says Octopussy is a movie I liked when I was 13, disliked in my late teens, 20s and 30s, then grew to love it in my 40s. Not sure what that means. Evolution of taste. I felt the same way about For Your Eyes Only.
I think it also might be a little bit of nostalgia in a way, because it's like this type of, I mean, Bond movies can be like a genre unto themselves, but the way they're trying to present parody as if it's classic, kind of like once you become more of a film connoisseur, if you will, in your 20s and 30s, you're seeing all sorts of other stuff. It's like sometimes you go back and watch something silly like this and you just enjoy it a lot more. Whereas, I probably felt the same way. Like I enjoyed this movie a lot when I loved this movie when I was 9. And then it's like, I didn't revisit it in my late teens or 20s but now in my 30s, it's like, oh, I actually kind of enjoy this a little bit, but probably, but not to the point of loving it. I can't commit to loving it. But
I can't see myself rewatching it just because I think maybe I'd watch the first half again, maybe for Magda. But Even Maud Adams, who I've had a James Bond attraction towards, because I don't think I've seen her in any other movies. But like, I like Maud Adams, and even when Maud Adams showed up, it was just like, you are a cardboard cutout of a character who has no consequence to this story except for being on the poster.
Yeah, Magda does more even. She's
Oh no, she's totes the best.
Yeah.
Like if there had been a twist saying that Magda was Octopussy,
that would have been a good twist.
Wouldn't it?
On the one hand, it's in your face because she's already has that tattoo and everything and works with Khan. But whereas maybe they could have had the actual Octopussy simply be running that little club on the palace and have nothing to do with it.
Like, and Magda is being like one of the pseudo henchmen, but then you find out that she is the one in charge, kind of like an Electra King.
Yeah, that would be awesome. See, we're making
Yeah.
a movie while we're sitting here talking about this.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, like, there are points watching this retrospectively and anticipatorily that just make me go, no, this is the eye of the storm. This is where every trope from a parody comes from, and also every trope of James Bond referencing itself as being a relic from the Cold War comes from.
Yeah.
So I hate it. When Tiki Fire was a kid, had the Corgi toy car and the horse trailer with the plane that would pop out, the fake horse butt, and all. 12-year-old Tiki Fire thought it was cool, and 43-year-old me thinks it's cool too.
Yeah.
Oh, movie logic. Hello, Captain. It's good to see you. Bond not only is a genius, he's also an expert at sleight of hand. I was fine with that whole. I liked it.
Yeah, he just takes it under the table and it's like, hey, wait a minute.
You wouldn't be allowed to in real life, though. You're right. Ahoy, Tim.
Hey, Tim.
Bond. James Hipta Bond. Oh, what the heck? Captain says, mind-numbingly obvious is the best obvious.
That's true.
No. I like subtle obvious. Oh, the only thing she blew was my cover cue. That's actually, I don't know, too risque for 83, but still a good joke. And then with the hot coals, Bond is too cool for the hot coals. Oh, and also, speaking of Govinda, like he was rather a prolific Bollywood star at the time, was he not?
Yes, it was. I believe he has a new biography out now you can read. He's still around.
That's amazing. That's really good. And the whole thing is like, and because of that sort of inundated with tropes, I was like, I think Abinda is the only character who is doing it for the money because he has a family to feed. Like, he's the only one. There was something about him. He had a regal, distinguished nature to him. He was protecting Kamal Khan because Kamal Khan was providing something for him. But at the end, when it was like, go out there and get him, and he's like, out there? And it's like, yeah. That's the only time that it's ever been, like, aside from Jaws disregarding Hugo Drax. But that was the one where I was like, no, I get this guy. I get this is clearly a job.
Right. And we see Scarpine do the same thing in the next film.
Yes. Well, yes. We'll get there. Tiki Fire continues. It's my little Octopussy. So weird and kitschy in the 80s. Again, that's the entire way this movie made money, is by calling it Octopussy.
Yeah, because the British think they're so brilliant with these little cheeky puns.
Well, cheeky puns are their business.
Yeah.
LDG of Geeks and Joy is here, and we thank, hey, LDG, hope you're having a good one. I miss you too, baby. And all is well. Oh, this one's just for me. I'm sorry. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Scotty.
And also, thank you so much for supporting this tirade. Also, go check out Positive Fandom. She is awesome. She's been going over the Wheel of Time with experts, and there have been many a conversation. You should check it out and give her a like and a subscribe.
And going over The Mandalorian with me.
What? When did that start?
It started a while ago. We've already we did the first 3 episodes in one, and then we did the 4th one, and we just recorded, and we did the 4th and 5th were in one, and we just recorded 6 in one and the 7 and 8 in one.
I've given all of your videos a like, and they are my current ASMR. I fall asleep to it while thinking about Pedro Pascal. And Tiki Fire's Retro Clubhouse says, I enjoy this movie greatly, but I agree, it makes little sense. Yeah. And I don't know why. And Kat, you had a really good point while we were talking about this. Is I don't know why I was expecting. I don't know.
Yeah, and this is also the period of films where Michael G. Wilson would participate on the scripts. Now, he didn't really have any formal training as a writer or anything, and he had Richard Maybaum working on this script, and the other screenwriter was a guy named let's see, what's his name? George MacDonald Fraser. So, I don't know like the story as to why Michael got involved with polishing these scripts or how much he would contribute to it, but he did that a lot in the Roger Moore era. But it didn't carry over into the. I don't think it carried over into the Dalton era. To check when we get there, but I don't think it did.
I'm not sure. And also, you know what? Maybe I should blame John Glenn a little bit, but he's done work. Like he's been okay.
Yeah, he directed this one and the next one and the last one.
And the last one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, but in discussing the climax of the film, Tiki Fire says it's easy to get confused in a movie that has 3 climax scenes. Octopussy has 3 climaxes. It makes sense mathematically.
Yes, Berlin, India, and the totally not India, southern New Mexico, Southern California plane.
Girl Ninja Army should have been introduced sooner, but
they were kind of doing their whole Cirque du Soleil type moves, and they were sneaking into the palace as well. And it's kind of like a mix.
I know, but all of the frustration of the muddled middle is when I'm sitting there and I'm being like, where were you guys earlier?
Yeah.
Multiple climaxes are great if you could pull them off. Yes, but the rhythm method is never advised. Bit of a laugh and a high five for his own joke. Actually, it was Tiki Fire giving him props. How do you feel about Louis Jordan in this movie? Is he too good for the movie? I think.
Yeah, from his resume, probably. Yeah, he and he was really good friends with Sidney Poitier. They've been in films, and he's around for a long time. He was still around all the way up until 2015.
Yeah, well, and I've seen him in other things. I couldn't name him off the top of my head because he's much more of a personality and a presence in film than a character. Whenever I see him, it's like, that's Louis Jordan.
Wasn't he in the original Swamp Thing in 1982?
That is true. He absolutely was. Good call.
Yeah, right
so yeah, no, and I do appreciate him, but I find him more of a Hollywood legend than as an actual actor.
Yeah, I kind of see what you mean there. Yeah.
Again,
but I agree. He is almost too good for this movie. It's like have him play the same character, but in like a movie that's not this silly and ridiculous.
Yeah, in Property of a Lady, written by Kat.
Or back in the Connery era, because I noticed he actually looked relatively young and looked the same for a very, very long time. Like he didn't seem to age that much at all. It was kind of interesting. But yeah, put that character in like a classic type of espionage type story. I think it would have been great. Who knows? He might have. I'd have to check his filmography.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Tiki Fire Retro Club. I don't know why I keep saying your full name. Tiki Fire's here. This was when they were cranking them out every 2 years, so maybe they didn't have time to really work the script and story problems.
Very true. Writing tends to be the hardest part because you have to actually come up with the ideas, whereas the business side of it, like where are you going to film, who are you going to cat, that all comes along relatively quickly. So that might very well have something to do with it.
Well, and that's a criticism that they give to modern film as well. Is like they build the action pieces around the plot, and I don't know why, but this is one of those situations where.
Or you mean build the plot around the action pieces?
Yeah, strike that, reverse it. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so that's sort of where like Robert Meyer Burnett, friend of the channel, resident Felix Leiter, he shows up from time to time. He says he has discussed many times on his channel and on others that Bond is more of a trendsetter as opposed to chasing trends. And in this movie, it's like when it crashes into Indiana Jones and it just keeps referencing its greatest hits. It reminds me of the time that I saw a flock of seagulls in a bar in rural Ontario in 2002. It's like, this is just sad. Hang it up.
Well, as you pointed out, they were trendsetters in the 60s, just not the 70s.
Of course. But I'm just saying at this point.
Assume that maybe Spielberg did see this movie and see the bit with the lamb head being served for dinner, then maybe that was, like I mentioned, maybe they copied that for Temple of Doom. Who knows? And that's something.
Temple of Doom is Spielberg's most spiteful sort of I'm doing whatever I want movie. So, and then finally to close us out in the chat, Tiki Fire says, I agree with everything said, but I still love this terrible movie for some reason.
I agree 100% because I was trying to figure out what number, because again, our ratings are comparing against other Bond movies, not other movies in general. But even as a Bond movie, it doesn't work very well. But I still find it entertaining, which is why I gave it at least a 4. And by the way, I love your avatar, Tiki Fire Retro Clubhouse. That just sounds like an awesome place to visit.
Please let us know where we can go and get ourselves a mojito.
Yes.
All right. Well, Kat, that was relatively painless. We ripped it off like a Band-Aid. There were good. There were bad. There was a yo-yo saw.
I saw a video recently. Somebody built like a fan-made replica of that, and it looked amazing, and it actually worked.
No, and that's cool. And if you're a fan of the movie, and it worked. Wow.
Well, it's not like it's automated. It's just, you have the 2 blades on either side, and you have the cable, and you just kind of spool it. It wouldn't make the same. I mean, the sound effect that they added, which makes it sound like there's a motor on it when there clearly was not. That's obviously some silly sound effect they added, just like the Tarzan yell. Okay, here's a quick question: what do you think is worse, the Tarzan yell in this movie, or the whole Tarzan swinging from the vines in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
Well, there's no Tarzan yell in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's just the swinging.
In that shot.
There are CGI monkeys. You know what? I would say I think that the fourth wall break in order that I disagree with, I would say Chewbacca in Return of the Jedi is worse. Then it goes Octopussy. Then it goes Mutt.
Okay.
That's my order.
I agree. I would agree with that. That works.
Okay. But now that we have taken care of Octopussy, we're about to be able to drink in the United States. Kat, next week is going to be our 21st show.
Yes.
And as it said at the end of this movie, is it From a View to a Kill?
I believe it says that in the credits. Yes, they would eventually drop from, but by force of habit, I still call it From a View to a Kill. Take place near me, actually, near my stomping grounds. I've probably been to more locations from this Bond movie than any other, because I don't think I've been to any other Bond locations because I've never been out of the country.
So as the movie says, James Bond will return, and so will Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns next week when we take a view to a kill. Bye, everybody. Thanks for playing.
Thank you.
There's the button.